Most people live their entire lives believing that success is some distant peak, a shimmering mirage at the end of a desert they've barely begun to cross. They tell themselves that they'll arrive someday when they have more time, more money, more confidence, more proof. But the truth, the one that most people never realize, is that they're already standing at the threshold. The difference between where you are and where you want to be isn't measured in miles. It's measured in awareness. You see, the mind loves to make things complicated. It convinces you that progress must be dramatic, that transformation must come with lightning and applause. But real change is quiet. It happens in the moments you almost overlook, the small decisions, the subtle shifts in perception, the instant you choose not to repeat an old pattern. That's the space where growth begins. It's not about learning more. It's about unlearning what keeps you from seeing how close you already are. Every goal, every dream, every version of success you've imagined isn't waiting somewhere out there. It's a mirror of your current beliefs. If you think you're far away, you'll act like it, you'll hesitate, you'll doubt, you'll keep chasing validation instead of trusting your own trajectory. But once you start to see that everything you want already exists as a possibility within you, that distance collapses. The only real gap between now and then is the one created by your perception. That's why most people never reach the point they're chasing. They're measuring the wrong thing. They look for results before they allow themselves to believe. They want evidence before commitment. But the market, the world, life itself, they all respond to alignment, not effort alone. When you finally align your inner expectations with what you claim to want, things start to move. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because you stopped fighting what was already available to you. You're closer than you think, because closeness isn't about distance. It's about clarity. The instant you shift from asking, how long will this take, to what's stopping me from seeing that it's already here, that's when the whole game changes. That's when opportunities that always existed start to reveal themselves. That's when patterns break and progress feels effortless, almost inevitable. Most people never realize that the breakthrough they're waiting for isn't something they'll find, it's something they'll recognize. And recognition happens the moment resistance drops, when you stop trying to force life to meet your timeline and start trusting that you're already on the right frequency. Momentum takes over, the path becomes clearer, not because it suddenly appeared, but because you finally looked up and saw it. You're closer than you think. Not someday, not eventually, but right now. The question isn't how to get there. The question is whether you can finally let go of the belief that you're not already almost home. Success is not some mountain waiting at the end of a long, punishing climb. It's a state of awareness that reveals itself once you stop believing you're far away from it. Most people chase success as if it's hiding somewhere outside themselves, buried under years of struggle, experience, or luck. They wake up each day thinking, if I just do more, push harder, learn longer, I'll finally get there. But that belief is the very thing keeping them from seeing that they're already much closer than they imagine. Success doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from seeing clearly. Awareness transforms your experience faster than any external achievement ever could. Every trader, every entrepreneur, every dreamer starts with a vision, a mental picture of what they want their life to look like, but very few understand that the gap between their current situation and that vision is made almost entirely of perception. If you perceive yourself as lacking, you'll act from lack. If you see yourself as close, as capable, as deserving, your actions will carry the confidence that aligns with success. The world responds to that internal conviction more than it responds to your skill or strategy. It's not that effort doesn't matter. It's that effort without awareness becomes blind repetition. Awareness transforms effort into precision. When people talk about working hard, they often mistake motion for progress. They think success is something they can force into existence through sheer willpower, but awareness reveals that success is not about doing more. It's about seeing more. When you begin to understand how your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs shape your actions, you stop wasting energy on resistance. You start to notice how often your fear of failure makes you sabotage opportunity. You notice how often your need for certainty stops you from taking a calculated risk. You notice how you keep repeating patterns, expecting different outcomes. Awareness shines a light on those invisible habits. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. And that's where transformation begins. The reason most people feel stuck is because they're focused on outcomes instead of alignment. They want results to prove that they're on the right path, but the path itself becomes clear only when they shift their perception. Think of success like tuning a radio frequency. The station is already broadcasting, but if your dial is slightly off, all you hear is static. You could spend hours trying to fix the radio, move to a different room, or buy a new antenna, but none of that matters until you adjust the frequency. That adjustment is awareness. When you're aligned with what you truly believe and feel worthy of receiving, the noise disappears. You start hearing the signal that was always there. This is why success often seems sudden to those who don't understand awareness. One day someone is struggling. The next day they appear to make it, but nothing truly changed overnight. What changed was their level of consciousness. They stopped acting from fear and began acting from trust. They stopped seeing success as something external and started embodying it internally. That shift might look small from the outside, but internally it's a complete recalibration. Suddenly, decisions become clearer, doubt becomes quieter, effort becomes more focused. Awareness creates an inner stillness that makes everything else fall into place. Awareness also dissolves comparison, the silent killer of confidence. When you measure your progress against others, you lose touch with your own rhythm. You start chasing what looks impressive instead of what feels aligned. But success built on comparison is fragile. It can't sustain itself because it's rooted in insecurity. Awareness brings you back to your own center. It reminds you that your path doesn't need to look like anyone else's. The moment you stop looking sideways and start observing yourself, honestly, you reclaim your power. You realize that awareness of self is the foundation of every kind of achievement. The truth is, you can't outperform your self-image. You can't create a life that's out of alignment with what you subconsciously believe you deserve. Awareness exposes that limitation. It shows you the stories you've been repeating since childhood, the ones that whisper, you're not ready, you're not good enough, you're not like them. Those beliefs act like invisible fences. You can't see them, but they dictate how far you'll go. Awareness doesn't destroy them instantly, it makes them visible, and once you see a fence, you realize it's just a line someone else drew. You can step over it anytime you decide to. When you stop seeing success as a distant event, you begin to experience it as a living process. You notice the small moments of alignment that happen every day, the intuition that tells you to pause, the clarity that helps you make a decision without overthinking, the calm that replaces fear when you act from trust instead of desperation. Awareness teaches you to value those subtle moments because they're the building blocks of everything bigger. Without them, no external success will ever feel stable or satisfying. Every environment, whether it's the market, business, or life, reflects your level of internal clarity. When you're unaware of your fears, the market will mirror your confusion. When you're aware of your strengths, opportunities begin to appear that were invisible before. This is not mysticism. It's simple cause and effect. Awareness changes the way you interpret data, the way you respond to uncertainty, the way you recover from loss. It gives you an edge that technical knowledge alone can't provide. You start making decisions from neutrality instead of emotion. You start trusting the process instead of reacting to every fluctuation. You start operating from a place of quiet confidence that doesn't need validation. Success as awareness also means understanding that failure is not a setback, it's feedback. Every so-called mistake is a mirror reflecting what you still haven't seen. Without awareness, failure feels personal. It feels like proof that you're not enough. But with awareness, failure becomes instructive. It reveals your blind spots, your biases, your assumptions. It becomes a teacher, not a punishment. Awareness turns pain into information, and that information becomes your advantage. That's how some people seem to evolve faster. They're not luckier, they're simply more aware. Most people think awareness is passive, but it's the most powerful form of action. It's the quiet force that changes how you show up in every moment. You can't fake awareness. You can't pretend to be conscious of something you refuse to see. But the moment you decide to become aware, to actually look without judgment or denial, everything starts shifting. Awareness doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be honest. It asks you to observe your reactions, your habits, your resistance. That observation alone weakens the power those patterns hold. What you see clearly can no longer control you unconsciously. As awareness deepens, success stops feeling like a chase and starts feeling like alignment. You stop waiting for permission. You stop hesitating before opportunities. You stop giving power to fear because you understand it's just an echo of an outdated story. Awareness expands your perception until the old limitations no longer fit. And when that happens, success is no longer something you're trying to reach. It's something you're already living. Real change doesn't arrive with fireworks, applause, or a sudden transformation that announces itself to the world. It begins quietly, in the smallest decisions that seem almost insignificant in the moment, the way you choose to respond instead of react, the way you decide to stay calm when things go wrong. the way you take responsibility instead of finding excuses. These are the subtle choices that over time compound into something powerful. The truth most people overlook is that growth rarely feels like growth while it's happening. It feels uncomfortable, uncertain, repetitive, but every small decision builds a foundation that eventually becomes unshakable. Most people underestimate the power of consistency because they're addicted to intensity. They want a big breakthrough, a life-changing moment, a dramatic sign that they finally arrived. But real change doesn't work that way. It's not built in grand gestures. It's built in the daily discipline of showing up, even when no one is watching. It's choosing to do what aligns with your future self, not what comforts your current one. Those micro choices, repeated over days, months, years, create a shift that feels invisible until it suddenly isn't. And when that shift finally becomes visible to others, it looks like an overnight success, but you'll know it wasn't. The reason small, consistent choices matter is because they rewire how you think and who you believe yourself to be. Every time you make a decision that aligns with growth, you're reinforcing a new identity. You're training your subconscious to expect progress, not resistance. Change, then, isn't about forcing new habits. It's about becoming the kind of person for whom those habits are natural. You stop asking, how do I stay disciplined? And start asking, who am I becoming through this discipline? It's where transformation begins. When your actions start flowing from identity, not effort. Think about the way most people approach improvement. They go all in for a short period, full of motivation, excitement, and expectations. But motivation fades because it's emotional fuel, not structural change. Consistency, on the other hand, doesn't depend on emotion. It depends on decision. Real change doesn't ask how you feel. It asks what you've committed to. It's built through structure, repetition, and awareness of your patterns. Once you understand that emotions are temporary but choices are permanent, you start building momentum that can't be easily shaken. The reason subtle, consistent action works is because it bypasses resistance. The human mind naturally resists anything that feels too big or too risky. When you try to make drastic changes overnight, your subconscious interprets it as a threat to stability. That's why you sabotage yourself after taking big leaps. It's not lack of willpower, it's psychological self-defense. But when you make small, manageable changes, you fly under the radar of resistance. Your mind accepts them as safe, and before long, those small actions start to form a new normal. Change becomes less about struggle and more about evolution. Most people spend too much time looking for motivation and not enough time building systems. Systems are what turns small decisions into lasting transformation. A system doesn't rely on emotion, it relies on clarity. When you know what needs to be done, when to do it, and why it matters, you remove the guesswork, you remove the debate between your excuses and your goals. Systems protect you from inconsistency because they turn growth into routine. Once your routine reflects your desired identity, change becomes automatic. It's no longer a battle, it's just who you are. Every major transformation you admire in others is the result of thousands of unseen micro-decisions. The athlete who performs effortlessly under pressure didn't build that composure in a week. The trader who manages risk without panic didn't develop that mindset after one successful trade. The entrepreneur who built a business from nothing didn't wake up with a perfect plan. They all started by doing the small, unglamorous things repeatedly. Studying when they didn't and feel like it, reflecting after mistakes, staying curious when others got frustrated. These consistent behaviors compound until they produce what looks like mastery. It's easy to romanticize the idea of big breakthroughs. Society celebrates the moment someone wins, not the years they spent preparing for that win. But in reality, breakthroughs are the final result of thousands of quiet repetitions. The person who commits to improving by 1% every day doesn't feel the difference immediately. But over time, that consistency builds exponential growth. The math of change is simple. Tiny improvements multiplied by time equal transformation. The problem is that most people quit before the compounding begins to show. They mistake silence for stagnation, not realizing that all progress is invisible before it's undeniable. The real challenge is learning to trust the process even when it feels slow. You won't always see the reward for your effort right away. Sometimes you'll question whether it's working. That's when most people give up, when they can't yet see the result of their persistence. But if you can stay consistent in those moments, you separate yourself from almost everyone else, because consistency through uncertainty is the purest form of belief. It says, I trust that my actions will eventually align with my vision, even if I can't see it yet. That kind of faith builds resilience, and resilience is the soil where real change takes root. The smallest shifts often create the biggest long-term outcomes. Choosing to reflect instead of react after a mistake builds emotional intelligence. Taking one small risk when fear tells you to stay still builds courage. Setting a routine and sticking to it when it's inconvenient builds discipline. Each of these actions seems minor on its own, but collectively they change the way you move through the world. You become more aware, more stable, more capable of handling uncertainty. That's what real change feels like. Not fireworks, but quiet confidence. There's also something deeply powerful about momentum. When you start stacking small wins, your brain begins to associate growth with pleasure instead of pain. You start craving consistency instead of chaos. You stop chasing instant gratification because long-term satisfaction becomes more rewarding. That's when change starts to sustain itself. The energy that once came from forcing effort is replaced by genuine desire to keep evolving. You begin to trust yourself again, and that trust becomes your new foundation. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. Real change allows for failure, missteps, and course corrections. In fact, those moments are essential because they test your commitment. When you fall off track and return, you strengthen your identity as someone who doesn't quit. You prove to yourself that discipline isn't about never failing. It's about always returning. Every time you start again, you remove a layer of doubt and replace it with evidence that you can rely on yourself. That internal evidence is what makes future challenges easier to handle. Small, consistent actions may not excite you, but they free you. They eliminate the pressure of needing to do everything at once. They give you control over your direction, even if progress feels slow. You learn to respect the process instead of rushing it. And when that mindset becomes your baseline, external results stop controlling your emotions. You no longer chase success. You create alignment. That's the quiet truth behind every lasting transformation. Your beliefs are the blueprint of your reality, the invisible architecture that shapes every decision, every action, and every outcome you experience. You don't see them, but they define the edges of what you think is possible. Every person is constantly living within the boundaries of their own belief system, whether they realize it or not. You can only move as far as your beliefs allow. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not about effort, luck, or talent. It's about perception. The mind cannot pursue what it does not believe it deserves. Until your beliefs align with your goals, progress will always feel like swimming against a current. You can't see every external result begins with an internal assumption. If you believe you're capable, you act with confidence, and opportunities naturally follow. If you believe you're unworthy, you hesitate, overthink, and repel the very outcomes you claim to want. The difference between those two realities is not circumstance, it's belief. You're never reacting to the world as it is. You're reacting to the world as you believe it is. That's why two people can experience the same event and draw completely different conclusions. One sees a setback as evidence of failure. The other sees it as feedback for growth. Their circumstances are identical, but their beliefs are worlds apart. Beliefs are formed through repetition and experience, often unconsciously. From childhood, you absorb ideas about success, money, failure, and worth. You watch how others react to uncertainty and slowly inherit their limitations as truth. Those unexamined beliefs sit quietly in the background, directing your life like unseen code in a program. They influence how you handle risk, how you respond to loss, how you measure your potential. Unless you consciously examine and update them, they continue to run the show. That's why awareness of your beliefs is so powerful. It exposes the hidden logic behind your behavior. Once you see the pattern, you have the power to change it. Your beliefs about possibility directly dictate the size of your goals. If you secretly believe that great success is reserved for others, you'll set goals small enough to confirm that story. You'll play safe because safety validates your identity. On the other hand, if you truly believe that expansion and abundance are available to you, you'll take bolder actions. You won't wait for permission because your belief system already grants it. Belief determines how much uncertainty you can tolerate. The stronger your internal certainty, the more freedom you have to explore, experiment, and evolve. What most people call luck is often the natural consequence of belief. When you believe something is possible, you begin to notice opportunities that align with that belief. It's not magic, it's selective perception. The brain filters information based on what it deems relevant to your survival and goals. If your belief system is rooted in limitation, you literally won't see possibilities even when they're right in front of you. But if your beliefs are open, optimistic, and aligned, your perception widens. You start to recognize patterns, ideas, and connections that used to go unnoticed. Life hasn't changed. Every belief carries emotional energy that either expands or contracts your experience. Limiting beliefs are heavy. They pull your attention toward fear, doubt, and scarcity. Empowering beliefs are light. They lift your awareness toward opportunity and trust. The emotional tone of your beliefs determines how you interpret the world. When you believe you're always running out of time, everything feels urgent. When you believe there's enough time to learn, grow, and create, you move calmly, deliberately, and effectively. That emotional shift alone can transform how you experience every challenge. Beliefs are self-reinforcing because the mind seeks consistency between what it believes and what it experiences. If you hold a belief that you're not good with money, you'll subconsciously act in ways that confirm it. You'll ignore opportunities, mismanage decisions, or overcomplicate simple things until the results match your expectations. Then you'll say, "See, I knew it." The cycle continues because it feels safer to be right than to be free. To break that cycle, you have to challenge the emotional comfort of your own certainty. You have to risk being wrong about your limitations, that moment of doubt. When you stop trusting your old stories, the beginning of real change. You don't get what you want, you get what you believe. Desire is intellectual, but belief is emotional. You can want success, happiness, or abundance with your mind, yet still reject it with your subconscious. That's why affirmation alone rarely works. If your deeper beliefs contradict your surface intentions, the subconscious always wins. Change doesn't happen by forcing belief. It happens by experiencing evidence that challenges the old one. Each time you take action that contradicts a limiting belief and survive, your mind updates its model of reality. Gradually, new beliefs replace old ones, not through argument, but through proof. Belief is also the foundation of resilience. When you believe that growth is always possible, no failure can destroy you. When you believe that every loss carries a lesson, setbacks become fuel instead of trauma. Resilient people don't avoid pain, they reinterpret it. Their belief system gives meaning to struggle. Without that belief, discomfort feels like punishment. With it, discomfort feels like progress. This is why belief shapes emotional stability. It defines the difference between seeing chaos as danger or opportunity. The market, business, and life itself reflect belief systems more than they reflect skill. A trader who believes losses are normal and recoverable trades differently than one who believes every loss is catastrophic. Their technical ability might be equal, but their results will diverge dramatically because belief dictates behavior under pressure. The same applies everywhere. Belief determines how you act when uncertainty rises. Those actions repeated over time become your outcomes. Most people try to change behavior without changing the beliefs behind it. They use discipline to fight their subconscious programming, not realizing they're trying to outwork a mental framework that contradicts their goal. It's like trying to drive with one foot on the accelerator and the other on the brake. You can't sustain progress that conflicts with your inner identity. To create effortless alignment, you have to work from the inside out. Changing belief first makes new behavior feel natural instead of forced. To understand your beliefs, watch your language. The words you use daily reveal what you truly think about yourself. Phrases like, "I can't," "I'm not that kind of person," or "that's just how things are," expose unconscious assumptions. These statements are not harmless. They're commitments. Every time you repeat them, you reinforce your limits. By changing language, you begin to change identity. When you shift from "I can't" to "I'm learning to," you reopen neural pathways that your old beliefs closed off. Small linguistic shifts eventually alter emotional patterns, and those emotional patterns reshape behavior. You don't need to destroy every limiting belief overnight. Awareness alone begins the process. When you can observe a belief without automatically obeying it, you weaken its influence. Most beliefs lose power when you stop defending them. Instead of arguing for your limitations, you start questioning them. You ask simple, disarming questions like, "What if this belief isn't true anymore?" Or "Who taught me this, and were they right?" Those questions create cognitive dissonance, a crack in the mental structure that lets light in. From there, new evidence begins to accumulate, and new possibilities emerge. The people who grow the fastest are those who take responsibility for their beliefs. They stop blaming circumstance and start examining perspective. They understand that the world doesn't give you what you deserve. It gives you what you're prepared to see. Belief is the lens through which you interpret everything. When the lens is distorted, no amount of effort can bring clarity. But once the lens is clean, you start realizing that success was never as far away as you thought. It was just waiting for you to believe it was possible. Alignment is the silent power behind every form of lasting success. Most people believe results come from effort alone, but effort without alignment is like rowing against the current. You move, but you never arrive. Alignment means your thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and actions are all pointed in the same direction. It's when what you say you want and what you subconsciously expect are not at war with each other. When alignment is present, effort feels lighter. You stop forcing outcomes because your actions flow naturally from your internal state. Success stops being a grind and starts being a rhythm. People misunderstand alignment as luck or timing, but it's actually precision. When your internal state matches your external pursuit, things begin to click. The reason alignment creates faster results is because it removes resistance. Resistance doesn't come from the world. It comes from within. When you act while doubting yourself, when you pursue a goal you secretly fear, when you say you want success but hold beliefs that contradict it, you split your energy. Half of you moves forward while the other half pulls back. That internal conflict drains momentum and creates confusion in every action you take. Alignment ends. That tug of war you can always sense when you're out of alignment. There's tension, hesitation, anxiety. You push harder, but it feels like effort is never enough. That's because you're trying to compensate for the friction between what you believe and what you're doing. People often mistake that discomfort for lack of motivation, but it's actually feedback from misalignment. When you're aligned, you don't need to motivate yourself constantly. The desire itself fuels you. The action feels clear, not forced. The process becomes sustainable because you're no longer swimming against your own beliefs. Alignment doesn't mean everything is easy. It means everything makes sense. It means you understand the purpose behind your struggle. It means your actions are congruent with your identity. When effort serves a deeper sense of meaning, fatigue turns into fulfillment. This is why some people can work tirelessly toward a goal and still feel energized. They're not in conflict with their direction. They're moving in harmony with what they truly value. Without that harmony, even small challenges feel overwhelming because they're reminders of inner contradiction. Most people live in partial alignment. They have goals that excite them intellectually but terrify them emotionally. They visualize abundance while believing they don't deserve it. They talk about confidence while secretly expecting rejection. This disconnection between the conscious and subconscious mind keeps them looping in the same patterns. They'll make some progress, then self-sabotage when results get close. It's not because they're weak. It's because their inner programming hasn't caught up to their outer ambition. The subconscious always wins. Alignment begins when both parts of the mind agree on what's possible. The process of creating alignment begins with honesty. You can't align with what you pretend to want. You must examine your intentions and strip away illusions. Ask yourself whether your goals come from inspiration or insecurity. Are you pursuing success because you love the process or because you fear being seen as less? Goals born from fear cannot align because fear and fulfillment operate on different frequencies. Fear demands control. Alignment flows from trust. When you act from trust, you allow timing, patience, and intuition to guide you instead of anxiety. Alignment also requires awareness of emotional signals. Emotions are your internal compass. They tell you whether your thoughts and actions are in harmony. Excitement, curiosity, calm, confidence. These emotions point toward alignment. Frustration, guilt, or dread often indicate resistance. Most people try to suppress negative emotions, but those emotions are valuable feedback. They reveal where your beliefs and desires clash. When you stop ignoring them and start listening, you gain clarity on what needs to change. Sometimes the goal doesn't need adjustment. Your beliefs do. Other times your path needs realignment because the goal no longer fits who you're becoming. The power of alignment lies in the energy it frees up. When you're aligned, you no longer waste mental energy managing contradictions. Your decisions become faster, your focus sharper, your presence stronger. You move from hesitation to certainty because your inner and outer selves are no longer fighting for control. That kind of certainty is magnetic. It draws the right opportunities, people, and timing into your life. You stop chasing because you've become a match for what you're pursuing. Alignment doesn't happen by chance. It's cultivated through awareness and integrity. Integrity in this sense doesn't just mean moral correctness. It means wholeness. It means your words, thoughts, and behaviors form a coherent system. When you make promises you don't keep, when you say yes out of fear, when you act against your own truth, you fracture that integrity. Each small act of self-betrayal chips away at alignment. Over time, those fractures accumulate into doubt. But when you begin to keep small promises to yourself, you rebuild alignment. Every act of integrity strengthens your confidence and reconnects you to your power. One of the most overlooked aspects of alignment is rest. Rest is not laziness, it's recalibration. It allows your mind and emotions to synchronize. When you're constantly pushing without pausing, your awareness dulls and your actions drift out of tune with your intentions. Stillness helps you listen to intuition. the quiet voice that guides aligned action. Most people drown it out with noise, distractions, and urgency, but alignment thrives in clarity. When you slow down, you stop mistaking busyness for progress. You begin to act from precision instead of pressure. Alignment also shifts how you interpret uncertainty. When you're aligned, you stop needing to control every outcome because you trust your direction. You no longer see obstacles as threats. You see them as redirections. Misalignment breeds panic because it feeds on insecurity. Alignment creates calm even in chaos because you're anchored internally. The external world can fluctuate, but your sense of purpose remains stable. That's why aligned people adapt faster. They're flexible without losing direction. They can pivot without losing themselves. True alignment creates momentum that feels effortless. The world seems to cooperate with you not because it's easier, but because you've removed the internal barriers that distorted your perception. You start recognizing synchronicity, small coincidences that seem perfectly timed. What you once called luck now feels like natural flow. That flow state isn't mystical, it's the absence of resistance. Alignment allows you to engage fully with the present moment where all power actually exists. The greatest advantage of alignment is clarity. Clarity removes noise. When you're aligned, you don't waste energy questioning your every move or seeking constant validation. You operate from a deeper sense of knowing. That knowing doesn't mean you have all the answers. It means you trust yourself enough to find them. It's the quiet conviction that your path, even with its uncertainty, is leading you somewhere meaningful. That conviction eliminates fear's influence over your decisions. You stop needing reassurance, because alignment itself is reassurance. Effort without alignment eventually leads to burnout. You can grind your way to temporary results, but they won't feel satisfying because they came from struggle instead of flow. Alignment doesn't mean avoiding hard work. It means your work feels connected to purpose. You still face challenges, but they don't drain you. They refine you. When your external actions and internal values reinforce each other, progress becomes sustainable. You no longer measure success solely by outcome, but by congruence with who you are becoming. The paradox of alignment is that it doesn't require force, it requires release. You don't create alignment by doing more. You create it by letting go of what doesn't fit, letting go of outdated beliefs, of identities you've outgrown, of expectations that aren't yours. As you release, you create space for clarity. That clarity turns into focus, and focus turns into flow. Every great creator, leader, or trader who operates at a high level does so not because they're perfect, but because they're aligned. Their internal state and external action reflect the same intention. And in that state, everything they do carries power. Clarity is the moment everything that once felt confusing suddenly becomes simple. It's not that the world changes, it's that you finally start seeing it for what it is instead of what your fears or assumptions made it appear to be. When clarity enters, doubt loses its grip. What once seemed complicated becomes obvious, not because the path became easier, but because your vision stopped being clouded by emotion and noise. Clarity isn't about having all the answers. It's about seeing the next step with such precision that hesitation fades. It turns chaos into direction. Most people don't lack opportunity. They lack the ability to see clearly what's already in front of them. Clarity is what happens when resistance dissolves. Resistance is born from confusion. When your desires, beliefs, and actions are misaligned, the mind becomes a battlefield of conflicting signals. You say you want success, but you also fear failure. You dream big, but your thoughts are small. You chase possibilities, but you doubt your ability to handle them. This inner contradiction clouds vision. The fog of uncertainty makes even simple decisions feel heavy. Clarity cuts through that fog by aligning your perception with truth instead of fear. It doesn't remove obstacles. It reveals how to move around them without wasting energy on confusion. Every breakthrough begins with clarity. Not motivation, not intensity, not luck, clarity. Motivation fades when you don't know what you're aiming for. Intensity burns out when you're chasing the wrong target. But clarity provides direction, and direction sustains momentum. When you're clear about what matters, decisions become easier, boundaries become natural, and distractions lose their power. Clarity creates emotional stillness. It silences the mental noise that comes from overthinking and comparison. Instead of constantly reacting to circumstances, you begin to act with deliberate purpose. The process of gaining clarity often begins with removing, not adding. People assume clarity comes from more information, more advice, more strategy, but in truth, it comes from less clutter. When your mind is overloaded with noise, even good ideas get buried. Real clarity is subtraction, the peeling away of what's irrelevant, outdated, or externally imposed. It's choosing simplicity over complexity, truth over performance. When you stop trying to see everything, you start seeing what actually matters. Most people mistake busyness for progress, but busyness is the enemy of clarity. The mind needs stillness to recognize patterns and connections that noise hides. Clarity doesn't always arrive as a grand revelation. Sometimes it shows up as a quiet knowing, a calm sense that you no longer need to force anything. It's when uncertainty doesn't feel threatening anymore because you understand the principle beneath it. You realize that most of what you feared was never real. It was a projection of your own insecurities. When those projections fade, you begin to see opportunities that were invisible before. They were never gone. Your attention was just consumed by distraction. Without clarity, effort multiplies but results diminish. You can spend years working hard on the wrong things, mistaking movement for direction. The absence of clarity breeds frustration because no matter how much energy you invest, nothing feels satisfying. You're chasing shadows, reacting to emotion, trying to fix symptoms instead of addressing the cause. But when clarity appears, everything rearranges. The same effort suddenly produces different outcomes because it's now aimed with precision. Energy that was once scattered becomes focused, and focus turns potential into progress. Clarity also transforms how you interpret failure. When you're unclear, every setback feels like a crisis. You take things personally, overanalyze, and lose confidence. But clarity allows you to see patterns within failure. You stop asking, why me, and start asking, what's this teaching me? That shift in perspective is everything. Failure stops being emotional and starts being instructional. It becomes data instead of drama. Clarity removes the story you tell yourself about failure and replaces it with understanding. That understanding leads to better decisions, and better decisions lead to consistent growth. Emotional clarity is just as powerful as mental clarity. When you understand what you feel and why you feel it, emotions stop controlling you. Most people think emotions are random, but they're messages. Fear, anger, doubt, they're not enemies. They're signals pointing toward unresolved beliefs or unmet needs. When you can observe those emotions without judgment, you gain insight instead of chaos. Emotional clarity gives you the ability to pause between reaction and response. That pause is where wisdom lives. It's where you start acting from awareness instead of habit. Clarity also changes the way you communicate with others. When you're unclear internally, your words carry hesitation, contradiction, or defensiveness. But when your thoughts and intentions align, your communication becomes direct and calm. You no longer speak to convince, you speak to express. That calm certainty is magnetic. People trust clarity because it feels grounded. It doesn't demand, it invites. Leaders, mentors, and visionaries aren't followed because they have all the answers. They're followed because they radiate clarity. They know what they stand for and where they're going. And that certainty inspires confidence in others, in any field, trading, business, art, or personal growth. Clarity is what separates noise from signal. The market rewards clarity of process, clarity of mindset, and clarity of emotion. When you're clear, hesitation fades, and hesitation is what destroys opportunity. Unclear people second guess their strategy, their timing, and their worth. They act from confusion instead of conviction. But clarity creates precision. It allows you to make decisions quickly, adjust intelligently, and stay neutral under pressure. You stop needing to predict outcomes because you trust your process. That trust is the essence of mastery. Gaining clarity requires honesty, and honesty requires courage. It means confronting the ways you've lied to yourself about your motives, your fears, your excuses. Most people avoid clarity because they fear what it will reveal. They fear discovering that they've been chasing goals that don't belong to them or clinging to identities that no longer fit. But until you face that truth, confusion will rule your decisions. The moment you choose truth over comfort, the fog begins to lift. You can't see the next step while pretending to be someone you're not. Clarity also thrives on simplicity of intention. When you try to please everyone or pursue too many outcomes at once, your energy fragments. You lose precision because your focus is divided, but when you commit fully to one clear direction, everything aligns behind it. Your attention, your emotion, your intuition. That unified force creates momentum that complexity can't match. Simplicity isn't weakness, it's strength. It's the power to choose one thing and let go of everything else that dilutes it. The most profound clarity comes from silence. In silence, the mind stops chasing answers and starts revealing them. It's not about forcing insight. It's about creating the space for it to surface. When you stop filling your mind with noise, opinions, distractions, endless comparisons, you reconnect with your own perception. That perception is sharper than you think. Deep down, you already know what's right for you. You've just been too busy doubting it. Silence isn't empty. It's full of direction waiting to be heard. When you gain clarity, external validation loses importance. You no longer need constant reassurance because your confidence no longer depends on approval. You start moving from inner conviction instead of outer noise. That's when progress accelerates. You stop wasting energy proving yourself and start using it to create. Clarity replaces insecurity with certainty. Not arrogance, but quiet certainty that comes from alignment between what you think, feel, and do. Clarity also amplifies intuition. When your mind isn't cluttered by fear or confusion, you begin to sense timing, opportunity, and direction with uncanny accuracy. Intuition isn't mystical. It's pattern recognition filtered through awareness. The clearer your awareness, the faster you recognize what's real and what's illusion. You stop chasing trends and start moving with timing that feels effortless. That's why clarity feels powerful. It connects logic with instinct until they work as one. Clarity is freedom. It frees you from indecision, from overthinking, from self-doubt. It turns movement into progress and chaos into order. It doesn't require perfection. It requires perception. Once you learn to see without distortion, every step becomes deliberate. Every choice carries meaning. Every obstacle becomes information. Clarity doesn't create success. It reveals that the potential for success was always there, waiting behind the noise.